All right. So next we have got Sean Bott, the mentalist, and he's wearing the same tie today, which is awesome and on purpose. I think. It's the only tie he owns, probably. So we're gonna buy him a new one after this. So anyway, Sean Bott. Now, Zach and team kind of came up with this idea and started saying, "Hey, Andrew, what about this mentalist?" I'm like, "Is that like a hypnotist? I don't know." And he's like, "No, it's a mentalist. He's amazing. He's gonna blow your mind." I said, "All right, well, let's see this." And so he came into my office. We sat down a little couch area there on the table, and he blew my mind. So what we're going to do is he's going to come up here and talk to us a little bit, blow our minds, and then connect that to what we all do every day. But tonight, right after dinner, so at 7 o'clock, he's doing an hour-long show right here, and it's amazing. So I've been watching all of this stuff on YouTube as well. So anyway, we're excited to have him.
Our next presenter began his love of entertaining crowds growing up on an army base in Saudi Arabia. He continues to open minds as a comedy mentalist, performing for all sizes of audiences, and has performed on the Sci-Fi Channel, the WB, and Radio Disney. Please welcome to eLBX, Sean Bott.
Hi, humans. This is an awkward wave. I like that 0 people are waving back. That is never a good sign. No, it's cool. It's cool. Your personal playground. I realize that's an awkward title after I wrote it, but still, I want you guys to take a look at this gentleman. This is the inspiration for what I'm going to do today. This is Dr. Michael Bott. On the street, he was known as Mickey P. To me, he was known as Papa. My father had 16 years of higher education. He had a doctorate and then went back to school to get a master's in education. Very smart man. He was one of the pillars of my world. In particular, you'll notice this. I don't know if you can see it very well. It started to turn gray towards the end. He looked like an otter, an incredibly cute otter. And his mustache was one of the pillars of my universe. When I saw him without his mustache once in the 26 years I got to be around that man, it destroyed my universe. It was like looking at a naked mole rat staring at me, which if you have not done, please do. It's horrifying. But the other pillar of my universe around that age, right around 5, 6, and 7 years old, my father had a change bowl, a bowl of change, and he kept, at that age, what seemed like an inexhaustible trove of treasure inside of that thing. I would go in there as a 5 and 6 and 7-year-old, and I would pick through the crushed aspirin tablets and the little safety pins. It was hazardous too, guys. But when you found silver, you knew you had struck something amazing. For years and years, frankly, into my teenage years, 17, 18 years old, I would go in. There was times I would walk away with $30 worth of quarters. Bless that man and his mustache. That pillar of my universe, I'd actually be willing to believe is possibly a pillar of some of your universes. As I was talking about that, raise your hand if you maybe thought back to your parents and maybe a change bowl that they had. Anybody, yes? Be honest, raise your hands. My friend in the blue shirt. The much better blue shirt than mine, as we pointed out, when you dress up like your promo, something has gone horribly wrong in life. But friend in the blue shirt, what is your name? Oh, actually, back behind you, sorry. You're also my friend in a blue shirt, but with the glasses in the blue shirt. Carl, did you think of the change bowl? Was it on your parents' dresser as a kid? It was in the kid. Whoa, you guys are mixing it up in your memory. That's amazing. Carl, did you ever raid that change bowl as a kid? Yeah. Carl, can you think back? Just imagine for a second. Can you remember being a kid? I want you to imagine being there with your best friend at that age. Does someone come to mind? Carl, I want you to imagine that your parents are kind of out of the room. You're sneaking there. I'm guessing since it was in the kitchen, maybe sometimes it was okay, maybe sometimes it wasn't okay to raid the change bowl. But Carl, I want you to imagine reaching in there and in your mind with your best friend there grabbing a big handful of change. First, Carl, 2 questions. First question is this. Who was standing by you? Pete. How much change did you and Pete walk away with? $5. Pete and $5. That's Carl. That's his memory. That's his moment. It's a connection brought on by a story I shared about this friendly otter gentleman here who is my father. Now, Carl, I'm going to have you join me up here in a second. I also need maybe 2 other human beings that want to join me up here. My friend with the beard, my Viking gentleman, yes. Will you join me? And I also need maybe friend that I pointed at initially that was asking if I was pointing at her. Would you mind joining me as well? Will you 3 join me right up here as people clap their kitten paws together? Yes? Now, this is what's interesting. For these people, you guys can come and stand. Actually, pop up here on stage. That's fine. I do not have my father's change bowl. I did stop by IKEA and spend $2. Let's face it, I'm wearing the same tie as always. It's just how I roll. We're going to do something a little bit different. I do not get to have silver in here. I'm still at a copper level in my life. But we're going to do something. I want to try this. Friend with the Viking goodness, what is your name? Chris. It's Chris, guys. What's your beard's name, Chris? Chris. That's a sign of a narcissist, Chris. Chris Jr. It's a manly beard. When I try to grow a beard, it looks like a forest fire happened on my face. And what is your name, my friend?
Kelly.
Kelly. Carl, Chris, Kelly. My bowl of change. Chris, I'm going to have you do me a favor. Can you just walk over to my bowl of change there? I'm going to undress mildly. Why did I tell you that? I don't know. But Chris, will you just come over here and just grab a little handful of change out of the bowl. And hold on to that just in your hand. And what we'll do, you can come stand right here by me. And can you drop the change just in my hand? All of it? Yeah. 10 cents, precisely. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Why are you clapping for that? That is useless. We'll build from here. Kelly, would you mind? Actually, you know what? I care about you. I care about you too, Carl. You can maybe grab a handful of change, Kelly, and you're going to hand it all to Carl. Okay? Hand it all to Carl. Carl, I'm going to ask you to do something kind of strange. Can you come kneel right here? But it's not a pleading, praying kind of kneel. This is more like you're going to get knighted. Okay. Yeah, you can just take a knee. And do you have all the change in one hand? Yeah? Yeah, is that comfy? I hope not, because it shouldn't be. I've got a good 10 more minutes, I think. So here's what we'll see what happens. Hold your hand out just like this, a little bit lower. This is 3 months of yoga, guys, to get this flexibility. 23. Would you mind standing up? And one at a time, as we count with him, can you drop the coins in there one at a time so we can count this? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Give Carl some love, and Kelly as well. Now, what's crazy is this. This is all a skill set I've learned, and frankly, I developed how to do this specifically for this conference for you all. But what's crazy is this. Carl had a thought at the very beginning. Do you remember when he had a memory that he engaged in? And you thought of it was Pete and $5. That was inside of your mind. This was all in reality. The thing is, the human mind cannot distinguish between things which are vividly imagined and things which are actually real. Inside of my shoe, underneath my arch support, Carl. Laugh at my pain, thank you guys. I scribbled a thought down earlier today, crumbled it up, stuffed it inside of my shoe. Carl, waiting inside of here. Can you do me a favor, my friend? Can you unfold that all the way and come stand right here? Can you tell everyone what was sitting there waiting for today?
It says Pete and $5.
Give all three of my new friends a big round of applause. You guys can head back to your chairs. Thank you so much for being willing. That is for you, my friend. Thank you for being willing to pop up. What on earth does this have to do with what you all do? Very good question. My goal for today is just to give you guys a few refresher tool sets that you all know and you all use consistently. The first is highly effective. It's no-nos. Not to be confused with no-nos, because you do not want to put that in educational content. But no-nos, the concept of when you are beginning to storyboard or brainstorm or create, we often limit ourselves before the process has even begun. My goal is for you guys to walk away with a bit more freedom, to start with yes and, which comes from an improv background or improv training. It's one of the best ways to think without limitations and then begin to border off what you need to do. It's a simple mind frame shift in what you're doing, but it's highly effective. It gives you the opportunity to actually play and engage parts of your brain that you would not normally engage in what you guys get to do. So instead of immediately thinking, no, that's not doable, that doesn't make sense, give yourself freedom in the creative process to approach it as though anything's possible. What I did right here started off as a blindfold routine, which in the world of mentalism, that goes back roughly 2,000 to 2,500 years ago, back to the oracles at Delphi. It goes back to the times of the ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks, and it's profoundly boring. And it went through an evolution process because I didn't think in terms of, no, that's stupid, I can't do that. I gave myself freedom to kick off my shoes in front of a group of people and to engage in memories from my childhood and hopefully create a little connection with random strangers. The second tool is using storytelling. The whole way that our brains process tends to be in a narrative format. Think about the way that you conceptualize your days, your months, your years, your lives. We think in terms of story. That's cross-cultural. That's something that is global and universal, and it's something unique to humans. The way that we think, the way that we feel tends to be through story format. So I want you guys to, when you can, use your stories or engage in story in what you're structuring and designing because it fascinates people, it draws them in, and it hooks us. When people are listening to storytellers, it's very interesting to watch the brain scans of people as they're listening to storytellers. What's several studies have found is when you're listening to a storyteller, the parts of the storyteller's brains that are light up in your brain almost simultaneously. You start to reflect and mirror what they're expressing. Think about every time you crack open a book. You love that not because you're watching something unfold, you love that because you're part of the unfolding. After there's synchronicity between both the teller and the listener, the brain then starts doing something interesting in the listener. We start trying to predict what's going to happen next in the story. Our brains have different areas and different regions light up than the storytellers because we crave and want so badly to know where story is going. The way that this ties into education and retention is pretty fascinating as well. One of the oldest and frankly one of the most usable tools for long-term retention of pretty mundane material is mnemonics. Raise your hands if anybody here is familiar with mnemonics. Mnemonics in its roughest format is essentially attaching a very strong visual image in connection with a fact, a word, a concept, and once you marry those two kind of jarring things together, a very vivid image, your brain tends to retain it and it's much easier to recall. At its essence, mnemonics are essentially storytelling format applied to fairly mundane material in many cases. And that's been a method that's been in use for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it works very well with our brains because we tend to think in terms of narrative format. So when you can, engage your stories. My story about my dad's Change Bowl, that's absolute truth. Like, my brothers and I still talk about it. It was our Indiana Jones golden statue moment growing up as kids. I want you guys also to remember play, where you can, when you can. It's something that the psychologists will tell you that the language of children is play. I would maintain and posit that the language of adults is play as well. We just don't get to do it enough. Unfortunately, we get very distracted. We get very distracted with everything that's going on. Our lives are far more complex than people's lives were 20, 30 years ago because we've added a lot of complexity. But what's interesting is the lower two tool sets, when you start to utilize storytelling, it actually forces people's minds to slow down. We can't really engage in a narrative format, whether telling or listening, unless our brains are in a space where we're fairly mindful. Also, when we play has a profoundly good effect, especially when you're designing content or modules for people that need to engage in it. Play is incredibly healthy, not only because it's fun, it slows our brains down. It kind of forces mindfulness. My son and my wife and I rush around our house and we shoot each other with Nerf guns. And it is, I used to think that it was just kind of a waste of time, or this is just so frantic and busy, I don't want to do it. And what I'm realizing more and more as I engage in that process is it's slowing my brain down. It's some of the most mindful stuff that I do, blasting my 6-year-old in the butt with a Nerf gun, and he in turn getting me. So these are some simple tools. And I know you guys could stand up here and teach me much more about these things than I can even bring to the table. But the reality is, I use these things consistently in front of thousands of people a year in order to engage, create connection, and hopefully retention. So again, with no no's, the yes and concept, when you approach and brainstorm and structure, give yourself freedom versus limitation initially, because you'll find yourself creating things that you would not have created, or ideas and concepts that would not have arrived in your mind if you had approached from just a perspective of boundaries. Instead of looking at the no's, look at the yeses and begin to build and have freedom as you do it, and then tailor according to what you need to create. The magic if is also an amazing thing that can kind of unlock your imagination in that process. Ask yourself, what if I could do anything to teach this? If I could draw on any resources, if I could use any tools, any stories, any people, any situation to hopefully create the strongest retention and efficacy in the programs I'm designing. As soon as you give yourself that freedom to think in those terms, you'll start to draw on creative tools and elements that you weren't even aware were present. Power storytelling, we're hardwired for connection. It unleashes our emotional and imaginative potential. It's something that we crave and yearn for as human beings. We are hardwired for connection and group interaction. Storytelling is an amazing way to do it. We have mirror neurons in our brains that actually allow us to experience whatever we are seeing happening. That's something that, frankly, animals all across the spectrum have, but humans have a highly refined and reformed version of it. If you guys come tonight to the show, I'm going to show you something crazy involving that. As far as increasing retention, as soon as you've married things emotionally and cognitively, people's retention skyrockets. It's much easier for people to recall something if it's embedded emotionally, whether that's through humor, through experience, through story, through feeling, as well as through sound educational content structuring. Remember, play. It's a survival skill. We don't do it enough. And play doesn't mean whipping out your phone. Play means actually setting it down and starting to play with concepts and process. Involve other people. Get your core of people you trust together, both at your work, but also expand your pool slightly outside of that. Utilize the amazing tools that eLearning Brothers provides you with and the amazing staff that they have. Also, bring in friends and family if you find yourself in a situation where you feel stuck. You'll be amazed at the concept of meekness, being willing to learn from the greatest or smallest people, will actually start to unlock a lot of ideas that you would have missed unless you've engaged in that process. Also, millennials love play. It's very interesting. As I interact with a lot of companies all across the spectrum of companies, I find more and more that millennials tend to be satisfied when they're engaged in play processes, not in a cheap or throwaway kind of way, but just in a way where they're allowed to play and kind of roam free As a millennial myself, we like to graze, we like to run, we like to kind of be crazy. It doesn't mean we don't bring a lot of tools and value, but it's just kind of the way that we format and structure things. The mundane becomes joy when you remember play. That is a bee or an ant. I'm not sure which. It's also a thank you. I hope you guys have an amazing evening. I'd love to see you guys tonight, and thank you so much.